cultures that for me represents the main goal of media and information literacy, and will provide our field with theoretical backgrounds, with healthy controversies, with research onto its effectiveness and its impact in today's society. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Divina Vrouwmeeks. I think it was really inspiring, and I hope that we'll have many questions. But before, I was told that we had some technical problems with streaming, so I would like to say to our online audience that they can join Q&A part after this presentation by through Slido. You can go to website slido.com, write our unique hashtag CIC 2022 literacy, as you can see in the presentation slide, and feel free to ask any questions. So when we have the Q&A part open, I would like to ask colleagues and guests here in the library, if you have any question, please raise your hand and we'll pass you the microphone. Okay, everything is crystal clear, I would say. No questions. Thank you very much, Divina, for your time, for your presentation, and also I hope that you enjoy the rest of the section. Thank you very much once again. And now I would like to ask Mikko Salo to join us with his presentation. Floor is yours. Yes, I can see. I think there's different screen sharing. Please try to start the presentation.
Okay, let's have a look. I think it would still be most useful. So you cannot link it to the...
Please wait a minute, we'll manage.
Okay, let's see. Because it shows it here, but it doesn't screen it there, so sorry for this one. No, I would have liked to put you a little bit on the map. I mean, it's just probably to liaise to what Divina says. I think that that's excellent. And Divina is a huge inspiration for us and has also helped Nordis, and we are. Okay. So anyway, so I think it's quite compatible. Some of the slides would try to help that. Where do we, so to say, focus within the wide area of the media literacy, and under that, where we really try to get to the digital information literacy, because our background in Faktabari, who is initiating within the Nordics the literacy development with our colleagues and with the University of Helsinki, is that we could say that how could we make also the fact-checking a little bit more impactful, and how it could contribute to the literacy world. It's not about taking it all from the wide area, but like focusing somewhere, and not just going for the, let's say, the content. Is it misdis or malinformation? But I think widely also describing, okay, nice. Widely also describing the information ecosystem we are living in, because that's what I see the most chaotic one. I think this echoes very well what Divina was saying. But so this first slide is practically just to show that we are up there in the north, are kind of course part of the Edmo family, and this presentation of mine is going to focus on the literacy development work we are doing. So we don't unfortunately have anything, let's say, concrete hands-on, give it this to the teachers and scale it up type of material to the teachers yet. This has been the deal guide that I will present today. It's more like, the kind of internal work that we have tried to see that what would really matter from the practitioner's point of view as well. Good. So, on the wide area of literacies, my colleague Kari Kivinen, who has been working with lately with Divina as well, to make literacies really matter in the EU context. We know it's a little bit the place where you take everything what you don't know, and especially Divina has been doing extremely important work to just make it matter in the European scale. And this is where we also focus the green area, so kind of social media literacy, data literacy, very much with our partner Sitra, the algorithm literacy more to the understanding level. Obviously, Divina has went much, let's say, further of giving examples on that one, and that privacy control, because for us it's the ecosystem is pretty much here. Because we have still tended to focus on the young people, because they are the ones who make the new media ecosystem. So everything has to be observed with this kind of a spying machine, if you want to exaggerate in a way. But this gives us so much data, so it's not anymore just like misdis or malinformation as such. So what is this digital information literacy? Definitions are very important. You can see it here. We define it as the ability to access, manage, understand, integrate, communicate, evaluate, create, and disseminate information safely and appropriately through digital technologies, including this one. But something like a novelty is that we also try to increase the awareness and ability to understand the functioning of the digital information landscape at large. I think we need to see the context, and I think this is not echoed enough now. And my background is more like in the tackling disinformation, sometimes with the security actors and all that. And I don't know that people are aware enough of the information chaos in the big time. And then focusing just on the, let's say, symptoms of it is useful, but not the whole picture. How to educate this one is then a bigger thing. Our impact has been mostly working, for example, with the Finnish authorities, trying to kind of fine-tune their approach so that it would really happen sooner or later. And it, of course, in the end, this is the question of the kind of the democracy. So it involves a dimension of active and civic engagement with the digital world and promote active citizenship. And this has been a major focus and the context now, I think, for all our efforts. And that's why it's so important now, because democracies are in trouble. I will talk about the guide. You can find the guide in entirety and in English since a couple of days in the address mentioned in in the slides, so faktabar.fi/DIL. These are the 5 points I probably would like to make you today. That, I mean, wonderful literacies are all good. To develop digital information literacy, we believe is especially critical now when we are developing what democracy means in the digital age. And in this context, we have identified it as a kind of a civics. And to make with the digital natives, the so-called digital natives, what the youngsters are obviously mentioned, really literate. And that's the youngsters are still the priority for us at the moment. We have tried to make the point that this could, and there is a lot of chapters in the guide on how could the fact-checking skills be used, not necessarily just like not necessarily just what's the outcome, but how to reach that one. And I think the fact-checkers could have a role model level there, because they are just take things as they take, and there is some interesting research that might be the right way. And DIL builds on the awareness, and there are some first tools that have been developed by Sitra that's more like a digital footprint, so that we understand that we actually probably don't understand too much. And that's always a kind of a good motivational thing. And then the final point, that this is all open source, so please do comment and get back to us, because we are trying to make it happen later. These are more like references. I will go quite quickly, because not to take too much people's time. We had a major Democracy Day event with the Finnish Think and Do, thanks Sitra, on this one last Thursday, and it echoed quite well to the really the big challenges. It echoes pretty well to the EDMO work and our previous sessions. There are 2 events that we talked about it more. And our approach, like let's say, fundamentally starts from the point that these are the online and offline environments, that the same principles should apply, and this is actually what the EU is doing at the moment. But the education element is not as visible as it should. There might be reasons for that one, even if Divina and Kari and many others have done a lot of work. There's very few competencies on the education, so it's actually left for a little bit for nobody in big picture. But this said, there are very interesting frameworks happening, and so to say, in our policy-related work, we have seen that if we could link our efforts to, for example, DigCom 2.2, it could have a more of a European impact, because people could kind of gather. It could be very good policy-wise, because there are these relatively loose declarations that the 80% of the population of the EU should be digital literate. What does it mean? Actually, it's defined there. So if we can link our efforts to this type of papers as an ex-commission official, so I mean, it makes it much more relevant, because it's not just doing a bit of this and that. This is more details. This is just an example what is in the comp. And then the fact-checking link. I don't know if there is a fact-checkers in the audience. I don't see any familiar faces here, and that's one of the EDMO problems as well. These communities doesn't really link. We try within the Nordics case, but there are very interesting things we might be able to learn from the fact-checkers, because they are kind of observing all that type of things for some sort of marks that is it really even worth having a look. So you have to be very selective in the information chaos. Here are some of the strategies that Kari identified in several groups, including a Stanford University-led led group and the e-work that was discussed. So these kind of deal strategies, if we put it that way, would include pre-bunking, debunking, what's fact-checking, and restraint strategies. These are all actually marked to more detail in the guide, so these are just like a kind of teasers from that point of view. Behind the idea is really that, yes, we should know and we should claim our rights, and claim our rights also towards the data. And for the most people, what I know, this kind of data literacy type of things is completely new, and this needs a kind of awareness, because this is how the information landscape practically works and it's tailored. And there's some very interesting cases on that one. And this has a very sound, let's say, base, so it's not that we have to reinvent the wheel. Finally, I will talk to you a little bit about in this regards, the footprint, because if it's something happening in the systemic level, how can you approach it? And this is where the Citra, our partner who has also contributed to the deal guide, has made a test. There is a link in the book, but this is how you can really see that how aware you are of the online environment that people think they know, so to say. And fine if you're fine, but I don't know even if there's too much of studies on that level yet. But this is actually quite interesting. It's still done by the 30,000 people in Finland, and it's available in English, so could be something useful in the future. And this is stolen from Kari's presentation. Kari is a teacher, so always to leave some homework. But these 3 questions are considered the key ones. And I mean, there's all kinds of, we have done a lot of checklists, but this is like a group of researchers that, like, if you have to summarize it somewhere, do it with these 3 questions, for example, and try to communicate that one. And who is spreading the claim online? So the source criticism. What evidence has been presented to support the claim? Quite evident for us, but not necessary anymore the standard. What do the other sources have to say about it? And I mean, these are kind of binds it to pretty much to the fact-checking approach that I mentioned. Not to overestimate it. Even if I agree with Divina, the fact-checking is very highly in all the EU documents and all that, because it's super symbolic. But I think this is the type of thinking that we should encourage, not necessarily just like more fact checks. There is not too many yet, but it's a big, so to say, rhetoric trick, whereas this is what really matters for our fellow citizens. Some references. And for more information, you can go for our website, or you can come and pick me a QR code, because I mean this is the this is the straight way to the guide and more information on our approach. Thanks for your attention, and looking forward for the feedback now or later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mikko. We can start Q&A part. Is there any question from the audience here in the library for Mikko? Please raise your hand. Okay. And online, we had just one question. And the question is, how do I get to specific fact-checking tools as a youngster?
For the basic fact-checking tools, like in online environment that could be of interest in, like, let's say, reverse image search or something in a very visual environment, I think the best things that we have tried, and I actually learned that, for example, AFP has done, because many of the hubs work with AFP, is like small short videos where, for example, fact checker or somebody like explains how they are just simply doing their work, and getting the kind of a simple things like, you know, this is what I need to do in practice, and actually that could be really fun for the youngsters. And we have some promising results on that one, that you can really inspire audience to do their own thing, at least before spreading, because let's face it, that's one of the only things that the normal, so next to awareness, they can use the kind of click restraints or this kind of not sharing before stopping and giving it a little thought. But that could be the short video material has been proven to be actually the format. I mean, think about what's running at the moment, TikToks and YouTube videos. So that's the format, at least to the young people.
Thank you very much once again for your time, your presentation, and also answering the question. And I would like to welcome Maya Klassen with her presentation.
Hello, everyone. Let's start with some technical difficulties, as always. Yeah? Ah, you renamed it. Okay, thank you. So, hello from me as well. It's been really interesting listening to my colleagues, especially because I can really see how we are building on each other's work, basically. And I definitely want to talk to you more, Mikko, so don't run away. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about how the theory of how to really inspire people in the classroom to take that knowledge outside of the classroom can be put to practice. Because as we well know, there are some kind of like hot sentences when it comes to media literacy, like, you know, everyone should be media literate, without really saying how we will get there exactly. Are we going to train all of our societies? Or how are we going to get to the point where media literacy is not some expert thing, but something that is very common in our daily lives? So I've decided to present a little case study that is still in the middle of research in the sense that I still have to do more interviews with the students, but maybe it will give you guys some ideas on how to put these really nice sentences of, you know, everyone's going to be media literate into actual practice. So I work in the University of Tartu, and I have been teaching media and information literacy related subjects for a while. But my background in general is in journalism and communication, and that's also the students I teach. Now, I have to give you a little bit of background before. First of all, because, you know, we like to show off, all of us, so here is a reasoning why Estonia is doing quite good. But also so you would know what is the foundation of the students that are coming to the university that I'm starting to teach. So obviously Estonia is a very small country. We have 1.3 million people, so you would not be surprised to learn that we have a broad security concept, meaning that the civic society has a very strong role in it. And of course, our Stratcom and psychological defense, same as in many countries from people who are present, is very strong and has been so for years now. Now, one thing that we have been doing that I think also has had quite an impact on our citizens understanding the dangers of not being media and information literate is the open communication strategies of our security agencies. So we have been putting out these yearbooks on foreign information like influencing operations. It's always a media event, it gets to mainstream media, and it really helps people to actually understand what is the context even. And of course, strong independent media and fact-checking, can't ignore it. We have national networks of stakeholders, also horizontal networks between the ministries, because we do talk about, you know, these issues being interdisciplinary, then of course the solutions actually have to be as well. And we also have a 35-hour course on media literacy year 11. So when I get the bachelor students, they already have a foundation. The course is mandatory for the students who have Estonian as their first language and is currently elective for the Russian-speaking Estonians. However, that will change in 2024. And of course, special attention to vulnerable audiences, meaning you know, people who live in Estonia physically, but live in a completely different information space digitally. And of course, showing off more. Instead of Mill Week this year, we are going for a whole month of Mill. And the reason we're talking about this as well is that we have laid a strong foundation, And now the question is, what are the next steps? But this is a quote my colleague has on her wall that I really, really like, because I think by now we have a lot of theories on how to get where we want to go. But, as the quote says, a theory does not simply go into practice. So it's not about really gathering the best data and then implementing it, but we actually still have to remember to measure effectiveness and actually ask ourselves whether we are just, shooting our guns in every direction, hoping we will actually hit something, or maybe we could, take some activities out and put our focus elsewhere. And this is why I have been talking about media literacy 2.0. So media literacy 1.0 would be very similar to the initial UNESCO models as well. So we're talking about resources, we're talking about, again, laying the basis, making sure that people who want to learn have somewhere to go, and making sure people who don't want to learn can't really escape the topic, at least not in formal education. And of course, now we are faced with the question of what happens next. So if you have a really good media literacy training, but then people leave the training and never use any of that knowledge or any of those skills, then have we really trained them? Or have we just spent some time together philosophizing, basically? So our questions are about how to empower. That also stems from my own research, stating that and this is also something I have done, that when we go too far with media literacy training, showing like the most extreme examples, showing the biggest problems, then we might make people feel like it's an expert problem. What can I do against the platforms and the algorithms? Or what can I do against the big hostile information operations? So our question really is how to make this everyone's business, and in the sense that it wouldn't be scary, it wouldn't be something difficult, but it would be kind of like your second nature, understanding that, our online lives have risks, they also have opportunities, and I know how to deal with both. And the one main question that I specifically focused on with this course that I'm about to talk about is how to achieve trickle-down knowledge hierarchies. So, for example, when Estonia had a change of law that you now had to also put on your seatbelt in the back seat, then one way, of course, was to go with the communication, the law has changed, this is now illegal, yada, yada, yada. But if you think about that you also have to change practices that have been there for a long time, then our police officers, our police communication department, to be more exact, came up with a really good idea. They went to kindergartens and they told kids why it's important to have your seatbelt on in the back seat, what happens if you don't, what happens if you do. And then the kids sit in the car in the evening and they're like, Mom, Dad, I have to put on my seatbelt. Trickle-down knowledge, right? We didn't have to get the parents into the kindergartens. We had to get someone to take this information and make sure that everyone in their family, for example, knows. And stemming from that, we designed this course. The course has quite a difficult name, but we all called it MILMI for short. And the main idea that we were focusing on was how to get our students to intervene. So the model was, the model of the course was to basically have some theory and then put it into practice straight away. Then again, some theory and into practice straight away. Very difficult for me as a lecturer, because I do like the sound of my own voice, like all of us in universities, but something that was really good for the students. And we started off with reflection and empathy-based exercises, meaning my digital footprint, my behavior, my understanding. A big part of it was also repeating just like me, so trying to get people out of the us versus them thinking, and instead being like, for example, my grandfather posts embarrassing stuff to everyone to see, just like me, before I knew what privacy settings were. So that instead of saying like, these are them who don't understand anything, we understand the broader concept of us. And one specific exercise that we did was something that the student reflected on as being the most inspiring to them. So we basically decided that for one whole month, we are going to go and intervene where disinformation, where fake news or fake facts, whatever you want to call them, actually happens. So we went into social media commentariums. Of course, this is something we had to go to the ethics board with, and it took quite a lot of designing. But what we came out with was that you need, of course, to provide students a way to opt out of publicly, intervening in comment sections. So what we did was you had 3 tracks. You could be the hero of the commentarium and actually, respond, but not to trolls. The idea was not to argue with trolls, but to make sure that the very loud minority in commentariums would not be perceived as the majority of the people in the country. So basically, opening up the voices that are silent because of the obvious abuse that you might get in commentariums. Then the second one was secret participants. So that meant noticing comments and ideas you might not agree with, but that were, well-founded, on fact basis. They had resources, and they were civil. So also it's a bit about noticing positive digital culture and positive discussions in online spaces. And then theoretical support for those who were allergic to commentariums or who just didn't specifically use Facebook, because this is also something we have to take into account, that most of our students don't actively use it. And what we came up with was that the students really, really relied on this feeling of we are all in this together. And this is something that carried them on throughout the course. So even those who were not actively commenting, they would see in the Facebook group where the lecturers and the students all communicated throughout this assignment what others are going through. They would go they would go try and communicate about how to do things better. And all of them did actually say that they noticed more. So at least we got one thing right, that now they actually went to and saw what is happening instead of just, as you said, passive versus active information, right? Does information hit you in the face without you noticing, or do you take the time to analyze and notice that, okay, there's probably some manipulation here? We had quite a few bigger projects born from it. I'm not going to get into it because I think I'm already over time. But just to say that having this basis of jointly doing something very small that took around 5 minutes per day did inspire to then come together and do both offline and online MIL projects later on. It gave the confidence they needed to actually intervene. And of course, we also realized in the end that the method is quite similar to a Swedish activist group called I Am Here. So the fraction now came to Estonia with our students and with us and has grown to 640 people. I'm not saying all of the students are still active in the group, not at all, but the ones who are, they're also active in the sense they're coming for our MIL projects. They have been coming back to the master's degree to kind of research the topic further. And the projects, even though the subject ended in spring, have been ongoing, especially the ones in social media. So the TikToks and the Instagrams still going. In conclusion, I'm not saying everyone should do this immediately. What I am saying is that I think we should try to get the methods of informal education, to get the methods of civic society coming together into formal education. Even if it's just an exercise, even if it's something that you can opt out of, it's important we don't only stay on the theoretical level of how can we fight this. We need to actually give people the sense of an experience that was successful, and I could probably do it again without the support of my fellow students and teachers. I would be really happy to share these plans and ideas with anyone who wants to. I think we are past that point of everyone in our own corners trying to invent our own systems. And I'll be happy to get feedback on how you can facilitate these type of things in one-day trainings or further. So I hope you will connect and we can talk about this some more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to remind our online audience that they can ask questions through Slido, and the participants here by raising hands. I would like to ask participants here, do you have any question for Maya? We have one online question. I would say it's a bit philosophical. So the question states, what do you think, how many literate people would be enough? Because you said it is impossible to have everyone literate.
is also, of course, a philosophical question in this sense that what is literate enough? Does it mean that I know how to log into Facebook, but does it mean that I am a part of some white hat trolling group, you know? But in general, I think a really good example comes from Ukraine. So Ukrainian stratcoms were saying that in the first 2 weeks of war, they mobilized around 4,000 bloggers, influencers, people who already had some sort of following and who they could give out the counter narratives to. So that's basically people who amplified their, governmental Twitters, their governmental pages. And in the context of Estonian population, that would mean that we would have to have 600 people who, in the case of, the worst happening, would feel like that they are literate enough to actually step in the front line. So maybe that would be kind of the philosophy question and philosophy answer place here, that it's not so much about making sure that everyone is literate, but making sure there are people who are literate and willing to act when the time comes.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Okay. I'll pass you the microphone.
Thanks. Thank you for a very interesting getting us into a more excited mode presentation. I have a very little and specific question. You mentioned that in the Hero of the Commentarium, the students were suggested not to engage with trolls.
Mm-hmm.
How did you explain to them? Did they have to do their own research on identifying trolls, or you included some guidance on this?
Of course. That was a part of the foundation training, basically. But just saying, how can you recognize different types of trolls? So, for example, in the case of commentariums, sea lioning is something that takes up a lot of time. Sea lioning meaning asking the innocent questions that really you know the answers to, but you're trying to get the energy out of the people, right? So we talked about all different types of trolling, but more so, the way I explained it was not that, you're not allowed to really talk to trolls, but why would you want the troll comments to get more engagement? Even if you put angry faces, even if you respond with reasonable things, the comment is lifted. So instead, the reasonable thing is to try and upvote or lift stuff that you agree with, or write a whole new comment and hope that people will lift yours up, so the algorithm doesn't hide it completely.
We have next question.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. It feels a bit strange, though, that you're teaching activism, which feels good on one side. On the other side, it's also it feels strange. I don't know. It's still. It needs to sink down in my head. But when people react online on disinformation, on online hate, etc., it might be it might be an attack on mental health, because it's something that if you react, you get other reactions. You can get hate against you. Is that something that you pay attention to? Because you can promote active media literacy, active citizenship on one hand, but you need to pay attention on the mental health issue as well.
Absolutely, I absolutely agree. So that was also a big part of it. Our ethics board would never let us do this without proper foundation, So of course it was a big part of it to actually, we talked especially on the basis of the research of our colleagues in our university, talking about how journalists get abused. So if, they would have a story out that is not liked, they would get coordinated attacks on their social media pages. This is definitely something we pay attention to. When it comes to the teaching activism part, I think the context of us being from Estonia and us starting 2 weeks after the war is very important. The students wanted to do something. It was our mission to give them a safe environment to do so, with a lot of material on how to stay safe. So, of course, the role conflict of, being a lecturer and also, in a way, being a white hat activist, it is clear, and I think it will be something that is going to be researched for years to come, especially in the context context of countries right next to Russia versus countries looking from further away. It's a very different feeling for sure. Also, I think if we had the option of separating media literacy, activism, making sure that, you know, the security concepts and the education concepts are very far away from each other, we would. But mostly when Estonian conferences on the topic happens, it's 100 of the same faces repeating in different places, you know. So I think it's also maybe a matter of human resources in our country a little bit.
Hello, Maya. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very, very interesting. And I would like to ask, I really liked your examples. I like it how you tackle all these issues and how it all starts in high school. Mm-hmm. I have that impression that we all kind of focus on teaching media and information literacy to students in academia. So I used to work with kids from the kindergarten upwards, so in all three stages, preschool, elementary, and secondary levels. And I'm really curious, how do you guys, I liked your example with the seatbelts. Mm-hmm. That really, I heard that one very loud, because I tried very hard to implement information and media literacy from the earliest stages. And we started with really funny examples like, I don't know, ice cream making. Can you make an ice cream out of, I don't know, beef or something like that? So silly things that appeal to kids. Mm-hmm. And I think in this age, and this, I believe it's called alpha generation now, right? They're born with gadgets, right? So we see very often how parents actually give their gadgets to babies in strollers. We cannot avoid that. Mm-hmm. These kids are born with that. This is their third arm. And how do you in Estonia, because it seems you've been doing a really good job, do you do anything with kids on lower levels? Mm-hmm. How do you prepare them? Because I believe there are two things that I'm concerned with educating people in academia. Not everyone goes as high as academia. Mm-hmm. And another thing is, I think it's very, very late if we start at that stage.
Exactly, absolutely agree.
How do you guys do it?
Absolutely agree with you. And mostly, I have to respond, it's project-based. So there is no like national strategy for kindergartens, but we have a lot of gamification when it comes to media literacy. So for example, for kindergarteners and 1st to 3rd grade, we have this game called Spoofy, where you basically go through different worlds and you tackle issues that are related to misunderstanding or being misled. That has now in Ukrainian language world coming out, and it's a big thing. And the other thing we do is offline games. So we have trainers go into schools. For example, right now we have 6 coming up this month that we are basically trying out a gamification of understanding some themes. So we're not talking about the whole ecosystem with kids in 1st grade. We are talking about, for example, when you press the button of buy stuff that your mom's gonna have to pay, and what happens then? You have this game of, trying out that you have been misled by you downloading an app that basically has a lot of extra money that you have to put in. You're in trouble now. How do you make sure you don't do it after? We also talk about content that misleads in the case of having actual examples. And also we talk about how to state, I don't want to be on this photo. I don't want to be uploaded there. So a little bit of agency, a little bit of practical stuff related to their own daily activities in their gadgets. And what we are still missing, and what is important, because I totally agree with the parents giving out the gadgets, we know from research that one of the reasons such young children get the gadgets is because the parents are impressed. Look at my child, a genius of TikTok, can do anything, anywhere. But in reality, the child is not old enough to analyze what they are doing, and they need the parental supervision to say, like, that is why this is happening, or after you do this, this will happen. So this is also a matter of, I think, for 1st graders to be media literate, their parents have to be at least at some point media literate. And this is something we are still trying to figure out how to do, like have a class meeting for parents that actually is a secret media literacy training. How can we do it? Because if you just yell out that let's train you both together, you always have a protest group saying, you know, media literacy is brainwash, where is the freedom of speech, la-di-da-di-da. So when it comes to the kids themselves, it's games and simple practical themes. When it comes to having the parents trained as well, this is something we're still working on. Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite genius, but also in a way, the what about the children trope, of course, we all know, but it works, right? So it could be a way to approach.
In my opinion, it sets quite a good foundation, at least for that generation. And, well, it took me quite a while to have my own in-laws and my parents to start using signals for my kids.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
They eventually embraced it. So I guess kids can teach us a lot of things.
Absolutely, and like I think kids, same as parents, you know, if nothing happens overnight. You can't expect people to wake up and behave completely different than yesterday. But what you can do is show them a simple path on how to slowly, with small steps, change it. And maybe have the kids in the back seat saying, "Mom, you should." That would help.
I guess. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we can go to another speakers. Thank you very much, Maya, for your presentation, for your time, and I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the section. And next, I would like to welcome Lucia Šťastná and Dominik Vorač.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to put the discussion a little back to the holistic approach and to the theory. Sorry for those who will be boring, but I think there are some things, some of my thoughts that maybe will be also interesting for you. I think media literacy and media education, and it was said before our presentation also, is, let's say, at the breaking point. Because there is a constant transformation of media and technology field, and also the requirements of education are still changing. That motivates still motivates media literacy experts to the idea if we need still renewed concept of media education and media literacy, or as some of us here also propose to leave the concept and to use some other concepts as transliteracy, for example. But now I think there is a new challenge, because this discussion has occupied the experts for many years. But now here is the new challenge, I think, and that is if we need maybe to narrow the concept of media literacy and media education to disinformation education. And I don't want to force you to some opinion, but let's think about it together. For them who are not media literacy experts, and here I would like to give an example of one of many definitions of media literacy that exists. This is my, let's say, definition of media literacy, and it comes from my dissertation research. I don't want to force you to accept it, but it's just an example that media literacy has many, or let's say several dimensions, where you can find very useful and very important skills and knowledge. And that's not just knowledge of disinformation or knowledge about fact-checking techniques. And I think the disinformation trap lies in here, that it's great that we have the first studies of media education focused on disinformation and about their efficacy. But, and that's also very, very good that we have many fact-checking initiatives that can help us in navigating ourselves through the media world and to the information chaos. But I think that at first, we shouldn't rely on the others in this sense. We should use our own brain. It's at first, and at the second, I think we need a broader context, deeper knowledge, and also the skills related to media world. That maybe, that's my proposition, the key is in critical dimension of media literacy, because it's, let's say, the application of all our knowledge and skills, and it enables us to use our brain and to make our own opinions. And that's why in the CERMO project, our media literacy unit has this broader perspective on media education related to disinformation. And I don't want to bother you with detailed description of what everything we do, but you can read it also in the brochure. You can the QR code in here, and it's in the introduction there. But as you can see, we do different activities targeted to different people. And now I think it's the right time to give the floor to my colleague, who is member of one of the teams, the Czech team, and he will tell you more about their approach to media education related to disinformation in practice. So now we move from theory to the practice again.
Yeah, thank you, Lucia. So as Lucy said, we are developing or creating a handbook, and I would like to shortly introduce our approach, which might not be different, for example, from Maya's work, but it's different from what I see in the Czech Republic. So let me start with old classic one, Bloom's taxonomy. We've got three education objective domains: cognitive, psychomotor, and affective. And what I see from the Czech handbooks is that they are covering the cognitive domain at most. So that means skills and knowledge. And I'm just asking, is it enough? Because what if there are some people, and there are some people, or for example, some politicians and famous people that might have skills and knowledge, but they still share fake news. And this has to do with the third domain, which is affective domain. Because, okay, so we've got skills and knowledge, but we don't use them. And like the highest stage of the affective domain is to use it, to have values and attitudes to use it. So maybe instead of asking what knowledge and skills do students need to identify hoaxes and fake news, we might ask, how can we teach media literacy so that in the future students don't share news they agree with but is false? And we can see it's not only about skills and knowledge, it's about using them. And I was just thinking how to put it like together, and then a lot of new topics came into my mind. So for example, are we teaching truth as a value? Are we teaching why is truth important? Or what will happen if the lies will be all over the world. And I think yesterday someone, and maybe even you, said that when there are lies, there is no democracy. Then we might have topic like intellectual humility. That means that maybe we have to know that we don't know everything. And this is really connected to self-reflection. So, for example, when we are not doctors or scientists, then maybe we don't have a clue about vaccines and coronavirus. So the self-reflection is about, let's say, always asking, okay, am I right? Did I use great sources, or am I just using this source because I agree with them, for example? And next topic could be, for example, media well-being, because we are now in the world where there are a lot of information around us, and this can lead to this kind of phenomena that is called information overload. And when we have too much information, then the process of decision making is weakened. So we are not that good in processing information. And there are more and more topics, and I would like to maybe inspire you, but I would like to connect with you to have more and more ideas. And yeah, as Lucy said, we've got our handbook here. It's like a sneak peek. It's not completed. But I hope you will like it, and it will inspire you in this kind of not so popular or famous or well-known concept of media literacy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the audience in the library? Yes, Maya.
Hi, I really liked your comment about the intellectual humility. And I feel like this is a key, not just for students, but also, for example, journalists who have made a mistake, academics who have made a mistake, and then they have to admit, and it's very uncomfortable to admit that, especially if you're the one who's supposed to know better. So do you also deal with kind of these, it's really an ego issue in some way, isn't it? Is that something you also talk about? And if yes, then how?
Yes, this is something that I'm thinking of, but the thing is, when you want to develop some activities, it's really difficult to make them. So, for example, on this slide, we've got this illusion. So I'm just talking to pupils and say, okay, you might see that these tables are the same, or are not the same. Sorry, but they are. And then we can go from this to the informations and like describe the whole context of it. That maybe when we see this is totally true, then it might not be, and we have to search for another source and etc. But yes, I have to admit it's so hard that I have not so much activity or not so many activities about it, but I'm trying.
Thank you very much. Is there any question? Yeah.
I love that you had, in the Bloom's taxonomy, there was also mentioned you have the affective component, which is very much ignored, I guess, in a lot of media literacy activities, because propaganda, conspiracy theories, a lot of other messages of disinformation, they try to affect our emotions, and it's often ignored. As media literacy practitioners, we try to invoke reasoning and stuff like that, but it doesn't matter when somebody is feeling that, yeah, but I don't feel safe by taking the vaccine. So then you can give up a lot of reasons why one should take the vaccine if he still feel, or he or she still feels unsafe, it's not working. So the affective component needs to be addressed, and I guess that's a very important thing that we should stress more in media literacy. So it's not a question. It's just it's
thank you. That was the whole message of my presentation, actually. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? No questions online. Thank you very much for your time and presentation. Thank you. And this is the end of the first part of our section. I would like to announce the coffee break. Thank you, our key speakers, for very inspiring thoughts and insights. We will see each other in 30 minutes, so in a half an hour we will continue with our program to panel discussion. Thank you very much. And for those who are watching us online, please stay tuned. Dear colleagues, dear guests, it is a great honor to welcome you today for the panel discussion which thematically follows the interesting and inspiring ideas we heard from our key speakers in the first part of our section. For those who are watching us through online stream, I would like to remind that if you have any questions, you can ask them through website slido.com with our hashtag CIC 2022 literacy. For those who has joined us just now, maybe you're a bit surprised that I do not look like in the picture up here in the presentation. My name is Luboš Greguš and I'm deputy of Norbert Vrabec, who could not attend this event due to his health reasons. Therefore, I will moderate this panel discussion. Several very special guests have accepted the invitation to our panel discussion, with whom we will primarily discuss the place and importance of media and information literacy in the age of global crisis and confrontations. Now, let me introduce the first panelist, who is Milena Dobreva. She is the leader of the Dissemination Research Group at Kate Institute of Sofia University, St. Kliment Ohridsky in Bulgaria. She has a long-standing interest in information behavior and in media and information literacy, and contributed to several international comparative studies on the skills and literacy of different groups of digital information users. Milena Dobreva is one of the co-authors of a pioneering information literacy toolkit aimed to support the school librarians in the Middle East, and led studies exploring information and media literacy provision commissioned by UNESCO and other UN agencies. Welcome. Our next panelist is Mariu Himakadakas. She is a researcher fellow in journalism studies at the University of Tartu in Estonia. Her research combines studies on news work, information disorders, and media and information literacy of different generations. She has published articles on contextual factors that lead to publishing misinformation or disinformation in journalism. Mariu Himakadakas studied the skills journalists use in debunking different forms of information disorders. Welcome also. The third panelist who has accepted our invitation is Jaroslav Aluch. He is an experienced practitioner in the field of media literacy, countering hate speech and communication with crisis-affected populations. He is a news literacy and counter-disinformation project manager at media development organization Transitions, with a special focus on elderly citizens. Thank you very much for joining us. And the last panelist of today's section, who is connected with us online, is Vitor Tome. He is an international expert researcher at the Center of Research and Studies in Sociology of the ISTE University Institute of Lisbon, lecturer at Autonomous University of Lisbon, teacher trainer for Portuguese Ministry of Education, and also journalist. He is currently coordinating and co-coordinating projects such as Digital Citizenship Academy or Media Literacy and Journalism. Vitor Tome is also a trainer of in-service teachers and journalists. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. I would like to kindly remind our panelists to answer for mostly 4 minutes, not much longer, so we all have the space to answer the questions. And also, if there are any questions online or here in the library, I would like to stick to the schedule. And my very first question is for our panelists. I would like to know whether, according to your opinion and your expertise, media and information literacy is a suitable solution of tools for increasing citizens' resistance to hybrid threats and sophisticated disinformation and propaganda strategies I ask this because the opinions on this question are very wide-ranging. Some people prefer solutions based on fact-checking, and while others emphasize the importance of regulatory measures on the part of digital platforms or states. However, I would be interested in the role of media and information literacy in increasing citizen resistance to disinformation. What is the role and potential of various media education solutions and tools in today's very complicated society? Mariu Himakadakas, would you like to start?
Much better. Thank you for this very interesting question. And I think the presentations also that we heard today kind of address this issue. Is media and information literacy the one and only thing that would promote the resilience? In my opinion, I think it's necessary, but it's just one tool in the toolbox. And when you mentioned the fact-checking, I think I would kind of like to make 2 points here. The first one is about buzzwords that kind of tend to overshadow some of our activities and initiatives. In 2016, it was fake news, then came disinformation. Then we have, for a long time, avoided the word propaganda. Then that's the hybrid threats. Then it's the resilience. Then are the building platforms and building toolkits and tools. And so we get kind of entangled in the buzzwords that are kind of currently topical, but we tend to forget the bigger picture. And I think that also applies to media and information literacy, that the bigger picture is we need to see the whole toolbox. For example, fact-checking, very great initiative in journalism, in other initiatives. I think it's just one tool. And as research shows, it doesn't solve all the problems that societies have. It does not actually promote or increase the resilience. It has some effects, but it doesn't change people political or health opinions, for example. It doesn't have that much power, and this is evidence-based. This has been widely researched in several countries. It does promote some trust towards those organizations that do fact-checking. So this is just one example of one tool or one kind of buzzword that is doing some work in some space, but we have to look at the whole picture if we are talking about information resilience in societies. What is the overall toolbox that we need? So taking kind of the helicopter view, analyzing what tools work for what tools are suitable for what, how they are used, how much they are promoted, what are the proportions, because fact-checking on strategic communication level might have, well, kind of none effect. It might have some effect on the individual level. Have we analyzed that? Have we analyzed this on evidence-based? So I think there are several questions that need to be asked in answering to your question. Is MIL, or media information literacy, the one tool that will kind of save us? Yeah, I will give the floor to you now.
Yes, good morning to everyone. I just wanted to add that even if we had the most brilliant and quick tools, because fact-checking takes some considerable time in many cases, people still need the media and information literacy skills to discover and to be aware. So I will add an example from my practical work. Fact-checking in Bulgaria is still quite young. We have several fact-checkers. The first internationally recognized one was announced literally 2 weeks ago. When we do, for example, training with librarians, because we are sitting here in a beautiful library, it was very surprising to discover that they were not aware of our local fact-checkers. So there is, this is just a reminder that we have to expand the knowledge and also to introduce the skills not only for the citizens, but also for those professional groups which work with citizens. Librarians are a very important group because they have to answer different questions of citizens, and they can guide them and introduce such tools to citizens, so we shouldn't miss these opportunities.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. I will follow up what my colleagues mentioned. I mean, I will give my perspective of providing media literacy services to older adults and senior citizens. Yes, I do agree media literacy is a useful toolbox that you can tap into that and use it in the programs that you design. But the problem is that if we're talking about the negative impact of hybrid threats and disinformation, the core of the problem is not necessarily low media literacy levels, right? So when you want to address the problem, you need to go deeper. And in the case of elderly and senior citizens, we identified, not surprisingly, that the major problem is the corrosion of trust in media, trust in institutions, trust in journalism. And I'm not going to talk about that necessarily now, but there's also this internal element of trust. So lack of trust in own capacity to navigate through the current information disorder, right? Really being anxious, very frustrated from the media ecosystem and from the fact that I don't know how to navigate this world anymore. So in terms of the programs that are trying to address this issue, you need to go deeper on this level. And to give you one specific example, we never wanted to teach fact-checking to the elderly citizens in our events because, I mean, I don't think it's fair to push them to say like, hey, always cross-check information from 3 different sources. Let's be honest to ourselves, who has the capacity, energy to do it with every piece of information that's incoming? But it was during the COVID when they came like, yes, well, your lectures on disinformation, interesting studies, but we would like to see how it works, right? So we started doing these clubs where we do verification and fact-checking, we learn these basic tools and approaches. And the major point I want to make is that the ultimate goal of running this type of events is not to necessarily push the audiences to do the fact-checking and do the verification, but it's rather a great opportunity to create new social contact, right? So imagine it, and this is the feedback we're getting from the seniors, like there was clubs playing cards, right, or crossword puzzles, or the other type of gathering. So we're basically using the topic of the so-called fake news or disinformation as an interesting opportunity to learn something new, meet with other people, meet with interesting guests, spend some nice time together, and experience success in the navigation in this information disorder. So we're addressing the emotion that the people, we hope, will be feeling after completing it. We've tried different media literacy approaches. I'll be happy to discuss about that. But that's my point. And the methodologies that we're discussing here are very useful, but you as an organization first, you need to identify where's your role in this kind of, where's your niche in this whole area of addressing the potential negative impacts of disinformation.
Thank you. Vitor, can we hear each other?
Good morning. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Okay, good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me to be here with you. Regarding your question, I would say that media literacy is not the panacea, is not the only solution, of course, as my colleague has just said, but we have at least 3 areas of the toolbox. I would say the technological area that includes, for instance, detection technologies, of course, also the fact-checking and then the fact-checkers. The second one is an area, a literacies area, in which we have the media literacy, the digital literacy, and also the communication science, because the way of science is communicated nowadays, sometimes it's difficult to the general public to understand. And this is key also. And a third area, I would say that we also need in using a stakeholder or following a stakeholder approach, a multi-stakeholder approach, sorry, we need laws and policies that address not only disinformation, but the emerging challenges. But nevertheless, I think that media literacy has an advantage because we started working with very young children in 2016, for instance. It's a very small project near in Lisbon neighborhood here, and it's possible to start working with children, teachers, and families at the preschool level. And I would say that media literacy has this advantage because we can start from crib and now and then proceed to lifelong learning. And this is key, in my humble opinion. Not only teach media literacy, but practices of media literacy that could improve resilience, I think.
Thank you very much for your answer. I think we can probably all agree that the well-developed media literacy is not only good, important, also only for adults and children, but also for other population groups. I would go with this question to Jaroslav Aluch. Among other things, you deal with news literacy and counter disinformation with a special focus, as you said, on elderly citizens. I would like to ask what makes this social group specific, and do you think seniors tend to be subject to disinformation more often than other groups of adults? And you mentioned the clubs. Are there any proven tools, other or strategies for working with seniors to protect them from the pitfalls of internet or to increase their resistance to disinformation?
Thank you. So the age is not the main part here, right? So it's rather the feeling of being excluded or included in the society. It really depends on what you were doing before you entered the senior age. It really depends on your social opportunities to meet with people, you know, to feel as a part of community. So all of these are more important aspects than the age itself, right? You can have someone who feels like old senior when he's 50 or she's 50. Someone, we have the most active fact checkers are 80, 85 years old, for example, and they really do feel like that they still need to keep working on this stuff, right? So the age is just a number. I mean, it sounds weird, but that's the point. But yes, there's a stereotype that, for example, Czech seniors are the most spreaders of fake news because they're spreading these hateful disinformation chain emails, which is true, but I don't think it's a problem in the numbers because they just use chain emails as their social network because they still didn't have discovered the beauty of Facebook, for example. But the type of content that is spreading through chain emails is more or less the same, and the volume of it is lower actually than what younger generations are spreading on Facebook, Twitter, and other social media. So it's unfair to label someone just because of his or her age as someone who's part of the most active spreaders of fake news and disinformation. So it's not helping, you know, to address the problem at all. But being older, being excluded, feeling frustrated that your needs are not being heard makes it much more easier for those who create and distribute disinformation because it creates a ground that is more susceptible to listen to those type of narratives, right? So again, but this brings me, I mean, the solution is not necessarily higher media literacy, but the solution is like really addressing the problems that make people feel excluded and vulnerable. Yeah, so then there are the technical capacities and skills, but many seniors are not actively using social media, you know, they're not the victims of the algorithms or anything like that, right? They get the information from their relatives, etc. So again, we need to address these underlying issues. I'm just trying to think what were your next questions, but my point is when we're designing the events, I think the key word here that we learned to focus on is a service design, right? So like, okay, there are no schools, oh yes, there are third-age universities, there are libraries, but there's no official curriculum or a system that you could tap into and do something systematically, right? So what we learned that is the most important approach is not necessarily campaigning or like this educational lecturing approach, but it's a service design approach, right? So like really working closely with local organizations, with organizations that work with seniors or on the local level, the librarians, and using it to be able to really do careful kind of information needs assessment, right? Like, why are people concerned? What are their fears from the media ecosystem, from the information disorder? And what are their needs that we can meet through like a service design? So this was the shift that we made since 2018 from this kind of protective counter-disinformation program, trying to protect seniors from the negative impacts, all the way through media literacy and trust building into kind of service design approach, where we really invest a lot of energy, spending a lot of time in the villages with the people on the meetings, and trying to really carefully understand what are their needs, what are the needs of the local actors, and then designing products and services that can help them to address those needs.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone from our panelists wants to add something, some expertise, any expertise on this issue from your countries?
Okay. I would like to bring an example from our previous project on media literacy, where we also worked with seniors. And our Croatian partner was the one who worked with seniors, and we did in different countries trainings on media and information literacy, telling what's fake news, what are clickbites, and so on. And after those trainings, very likely what you said, the seniors came and said, oh, you know, very nice training, but I don't actually use internet at all. I'm just kind of sometimes struggling with WhatsApp. Could you just show how you use WhatsApp? So that kind of illustrates their knowledge, and it's not just technological knowledge, but overall it's that. They are not digital natives. They're very far behind, not even differentiating internet from WhatsApp, or how do I vote, or those. They are much more excluded of our information ecosystem than we can imagine. So building on media literacy or information literacy, we're building stories on that has no foundation there, technological foundation, knowing how to use things. So the primary needs in media and information literacy are in another place than, and it's much lower than we think. So I think it's a much more complex thing to practice media and information literacy in those groups which are much more excluded than perhaps we are or the teenagers are. But at the same time, when you look at who are the MIL trainings mainly aimed at, teachers, youth trainers, teenagers, children, all of those who we've spoken about. So I think there are several other vulnerable groups who need to be addressed, and we have to start on very, very basic foundations.
Yeah, I also wanted to say something more about the profiling, let's say, the typical groups we address. One way to look at it could be to identify whether people are actively searching for information or they're passive consumers of something which arrives to them. So with this group of people, the elderly, we could say that they would look more for health-related information, for different pieces of information related to benefits, services, and so on. Here the question is, do they know where to look for this information? And especially in the health-related one, we have lots of cases when there is really untrustworthy information they are consuming because they look for solutions of issues they have. With the passive information, it's more difficult. Actually, in this world of disinformation, we are trying to find solutions exactly for these passive flows, because something hits your social media and then you have to either pay attention, ignore, and some people just spread it further. So I think we can do more in understanding this type of the behaviors, what people are trying to do actively, and also how do they respond to the passive flow, what comes basically lands on their devices or laps if they use a laptop, and what would be their actions.
Okay, thank you very much. Vitor, would you like to add something to this issue?
Yes, please. Thank you. In Portugal and also in Spain, but now let me just focus on in Portugal. The journalists started the project that is called Media Literacy and Journalism in 2017, and the main aim is to train teachers. And we have already trained around 300 teachers nationwide, but we have also intervention in different areas with different groups. And one of the interventions started in Madeira Island this year, before summer. A group of journalists went to retirement houses, and the main aim was not to teach the elderly people, was, as you said, to hear from them what are their needs, what they expect from this discussion with journalists. And it was really, really interesting. It was a kind of an exploratory activity. And now these journalists that were all trained, we are more or less 160 professional journalists and other media professionals. And we also have programming activities with other excluded groups in Portugal. But considering the elderly people, for instance, one of the projects that we have organized in May was the local newspaper, the regional university, and all the retirement houses of a region in Portugal, in the center of Portugal. They are working together. So the journalists are training the students and learning with the students from the university, communication and social service students. And then they go to the retirement houses and they discuss. And the objective is to learn a lot from them, and then to organize activities that we can that could be helpful for them.
Want to add, based on what we've all kind of said, if the information and disinformation is mainly online and the threats are mainly there, then all those activities that take place in real life, in real human person-to-person communication, are much more valuable. And I think all of our experiences from Portugal and also from elsewhere Europe, we can see that just talking to each other face to face has much more effect. And I think that's one point of resilience that we have to practice more.
Great, thank you very much. I would like to react to answer of Victor Tomé. You mentioned teachers, and I think that's another important group for whom media literacy extremely crucial. Victor Tomé, you have personal experience, as you said, with several programs, and one of them is as a trainer of in-service teachers for the Portuguese Ministry of Education. Can you share with us your experience in this area? I'm interested mainly in whether the teachers in Portugal have a sufficient level of media literacy, and whether they are interested in further developing their media and digital skills.
For a question, yes, we started a project in 2017, as I told you, and the idea was to organize a certified course specific for in-service. It was an in-service teacher training, and it was certified by the Ministry of Education. And then we started inviting teachers; they were free to enroll. And the first phase of these trainings occurred in 2019, from January to May, and the idea was to the course has 40 hours, 20 on site in the classroom working with them, and 20 in which they can develop small projects with their students at local communities, not only schools, but also they can involve the school board, the parents, and other people from the community. And the main aim of this training is the journalists are there, of course, to teach also, but to help them developing these projects, and now monitoring these projects and help them assessing these projects, so these projects can be replicated after. Of course, in 2020 was the second phase. The second phase completely changed because of the pandemic. So the journalists had to learn a lot about online teaching and how to cooperate online. It was a great experience. By that time in March, we were running 7 different courses, even in Azores, in the Azores Islands, and it was difficult. The courses ended in October. but we learned a lot. And from these courses and others that we had even this year in 2022, what we can say is teachers are really interested in this kind of courses, not only on media literacy in general, but then they are free to choose the main areas having in mind the local contexts. So if they want to focus on disinformation, or if they want to focus on content creation or a video channel, they are free to choose, and we the journalists are there to help them. What we can say is, if we are able to involve the school boards, this is key. If we don't monitoring the projects, don't succeed. It's impossible. The projects stop by the end of the school year. So it's important to monitoring and to keep helping them and asking them, what do you need? How can we help you? And it is okay. It is also important for the students and for the communities, because according to teachers' perceptions, and we are dealing with perceptions, of course, and it's important to notice that the students are more aware, they are more interested in developing activities together, they are more interested in discussing that in family and also with friends. These are some of the results we have so far. Of course, we have several others, but having in mind your question, I think these are the main ones.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask if you want to react. The floor is yours.
Yeah, just to continue this topic, educating teachers is great, but this is one side of the medal. The other is the curricula, and I think that probably the EDMU hubs could play a very important role in curricular reforms in those countries where actually the place of these skills is not well defined. I'll give an example coming from outside of the European Commission. Last year we were looking at the national curricula in a Middle Eastern country and how the various media and information skills are blended into different subjects. And what was very interesting is that we discovered a sort of an inverted pyramid, I would say. You could identify that in various subjects you see repetitive use of the skills to visualize something, to illustrate something. So this is different skills related to the use of information. But actually the basic skills to discover the information, and especially the skill to check the trustworthiness, the authority of the sources, were practically missing. So when we discuss about the education of teachers, we need to somehow make this connection. Who are those teachers? Which subjects have different components? What is missing from the understanding of the teachers about the new trends? Because basically here we have, I think, quite a big task to upskill teachers who are working with different groups of students and on different levels and different subjects. So this is a big task. It's not going to be resolved with training few hundreds of teachers. It actually has to infiltrate the whole educational system. And as a sort of wrapping up of this, we have a European Media Literacy Index. And it's not a surprise that countries like Finland and Estonia, we heard from, are on the top of this index. We saw interesting examples, and you have this very palpable feeling how these skills are introduced at the early stages of the educational system. But for those countries in Europe which are on the bottom of the index, one of the explanations is that actually the educational system is not still infiltrated. It's not covering these skills on a good level.
Anyone want to react to what we heard? Okay, I think I will stay with you, Milena. Media literate person should have an understanding of how social media uses the latest knowledge in behavioral and data science to attract the audience attention and spread harmful disinformation and hybrid threats. I think that coping with these challenges will not be easy for media education, as we are already in the in a section of several scientific and technological disciplines. You have a long-standing interest in information behavior, and you also work for Gate Institute, which is an EC-founded Center of Excellence in Big Data for Smart Society. Can you tell us something more about this topic?
So the information behaviors are a very exciting area to study, and they're not a constant. So we know that the technologies are changing all the time. Every few months there is something which requires people to update something in their skills, in their practices, in their everyday life. We can look at it from the side of what people are doing, so how they discover information, how they organize it, and how they're using it. So these are activities which don't change, but the tools which we are using are changing. There are plenty of studies ongoing. It's a very active field of research. But for example, yesterday at the technological session, we were discussing what are the actual needs of fact checkers when we design technological tools to help them, what needs we are addressing and how well we are meeting these needs. And what we discovered is that there is not a very clear answer. So in our domain, we have to find more about the needs of specific groups. So if we address fact checkers, it's one story. If we speak about the citizens who are more susceptible to disinformation for various reasons, this is a different group of needs. I already said fact-checking takes a considerable amount of time. I think one of the trends we will be seeing is that it will have to be pushed to become quicker and for maybe more people to have some toolkits which will help them, but you cannot use a toolkit without having the ability to assess what is going on. And this is our side, the media and information literacy skills.
Thank you. Anyone would like to react to what we heard?
I will take the opportunity because that very much spoke to me. I think the problem should start not what information does with people, because that can only result in reactive activities, but we should more consider what people do with the information. And that also gives us that different stakeholders, different target groups deal with information differently, their needs are different, and that also shows what we can do to make them more resilient, and this is proactive. Or this enables us to do proactive activities. This is where the media information literacy comes in. You have the button, you have the capability and empowerment to do something with information or not to do, or include or exclude yourself, so on. So giving that sort of tools to people beforehand, and not waiting what the information does with people. And regarding fact-checking, I think it's kind of an oxymoron in itself, because fact as such is a piece of information that is true, and if it's not a fact. So checking facts that are pieces of information that have been published is a bit weird. Of course, coming from journalism studies and being a former journalist, fact-checking is the basis of journalism, publishing information that is verified. In that essence, it should be done before, it should be done backstage, and it should be normal part of pre-activities, pre-publishing, not doing afterwards and fetishizing over that. So that's a very strong point of view. I can think that several people can object that, but fact is something that is true, and verifying that beforehand makes it actually true, not the vice versa. So, yeah.
Thank you. Any reactions to what's it, Mario?
Yeah, maybe if I may follow up on that, because we're also from the journalistic background, and I think what we do is more like news literacy than the media literacy. And we've discussed the issue of trust and the need for like people to really meet, maybe face to face, to be able to address it. And I also like the approach of this effective element of media literacy. And some researchers suggest, and it does confirm in the field when I'm meeting with the people, if you are talking about trust in media or in the journalists, there are at least two elements of trust. One of them can be called reflexive, and the other one is the effective, right? The reflexive is that we trust the mainstream media, that they do the job, right? So that they do some fact checking, they have the reporters, then there are some editors, there are some ethical standards, right? So that the information will be processed somehow. So that's why if we ask people in the surveys and the research, do you trust media? Usually this is it. Well, yes, we trust them that they do this work. But then there is this other component, very important, which is the effective trust. So that's the trust that the journalists or the media represent my needs, represent my values, my opinions. And that's the problem. And these two elements of trust usually go against each other, because we do expect journalists to be unbiased and balanced, but at the same time we expect them to be ours, right? To be covering our perspective, our attitudes. So so when I try to turn this into action, when we're running the events that we do, so we bring a lot of journalists with us, right? It's up to them to defend their work, to prove that they're doing a good job, but the meetings always we're trying to fulfill these two components, right? So the reflexive one, so that, you know, you show them that work with information is a craft, right? You need to do it right. This is how you do it. These are the steps. This is how we do fact checking. This is how we do fact checking. This is the tools that you can use. But there's also important to deliver this effective level of trust. That means that the journalist actually is willing to go from the newsroom from Prague, visit people in a remote village, go there maybe once or twice to show that he cares or she cares, and that it's a nice person, who's ordinary person, who's not just a puppet of some you know, dark forces behind, and is able to reflect the people's needs. So this is, I do believe that this is beneficial for multiple sides, because also for the journalists, this is an opportunity to actually meet with people and hear in a safe environment, like, why do people don't trust them? You know, what are the concerns of the people? And maybe making these journalists more sympathetic and empathetic to the needs of some specific groups, such as seniors in this case. So these are the elements that are absolutely essential for the trust building. And to be honest, if you ask the participants of the event a year after what they remember, they might not remember the tools and tactics and fact-checking practices, but they will remember that they spent some interesting time with some nice person, interesting person who was sharing his or her work as a journalist, and that they had an interesting time together, and the people had the opportunity to express themselves. And this project really grew up from actually journalism students. When we were doing training for journalism students with Bellingcat and others back in 2018, how to do digital investigations, the journalism students came with the idea, oh, you know, there are some neglected groups, should we work with them? And building this intergenerational trust is also absolutely critical component that we need to consider.
Okay, great, thank you. Vitor, you want to?
If I may, okay. Yes, thank you. I fully agree with what my colleagues have just said, and let me just add that one of the main aims of the activity 5 of iVerifier is to train journalists, and not because they don't know how to do their job, but to discuss with them, not only with professional journalists, but also with journalism students, discuss with them how the fact-checking works. Because nowadays, the problem, like before, but the journalists always say the same, we have no time. We are 3 or 4. And we have to do all the work, so we don't have time to attend trainings, to learn, and sometimes they don't have time to edit and to verify all the facts. That said, they won't have time to do their job. And it's important. For instance, we organize 3 different courses. One course has 1 hour if online, or 2 hours if face-to-face. Another course is only face-to-face and has 4 hours, and the third one has 8 hours. We tested these courses in Portugal and in Spain. These courses were organized by researchers, journalists, fact-checkers, all the team that we have in the iVerifier. We are 23 different partners, and we learned a lot. So they need practices. They want to, of course, to discuss with each other, of course, but to learn and to practice, because they, maybe if they know the tools and where are the tools, in some cases they have no time to to practice, to use these tools. And this is key. So I think that, and I'm of course also a journalist, this is important, and they are, when we are, now we are opening not only the tests, but the real trainings, and we have a lot of journalists and even media companies that are interested in these courses.
Thank you very much. I think we can start the Q&A part of this discussion. If anyone from online or here in the library has a question, please raise your hand and we'll pass you the microphone.
Yeah, always a good student, asking first, no awkward silences. Thank you so much for the interesting discussion. We have talked about a lot of professions that come together with our topic, right? We've talked about teachers, we talked about journalists, but one really interesting thing you mentioned was social workers, and specifically in the context of the elderly, specifically in the context, I'm from Estonia, so a lot of e-services. I think it is a really good question of whether or not media literacy is something social workers should deal with to make sure that everyone has an equal access to services. So I would like to hear all of your opinions on how social work, in your opinion and in your country's context, can or is or should be connected with media literacy, or just argue with me and tell me it's not a social service in the case of the elderly specifically. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Who would like to start? Yaroslav, you are holding the microphone, so you can start.
I said the keyboard service, right? So I do understand that. Yeah, no, of course, I agree with you. The question and the underlying issues are pretty clear, right? If the people, the neglected populations, don't feel that they are taken care of or that their needs are not being heard, you can do how many media literacy trainings you can, but you're not really addressing the issue. And we've seen it in different cities where there were a program of media literacy, but then the local municipalities stopped providing funding for the local clubs where the local senior population could learn English, learn different skills, meet and talk. And in such a case, I mean, I'm 100% sure that they will survive with our media literacy classes. But you can see that how damaging it is to the community, right? They suddenly don't have a place to meet. It's frustrating. So where they spend their time? Well, on the internet with emails and sharing them and being frustrated, right? So again, no matter how many great media literacy interventions and classes we will do, unless we so I might not be focusing on necessarily the social workers. They are the last ones in the whole chain, but social policies, let's call it that way, on the local level, right? So this should include this part, or this element, either empowering the seniors in like being more confident in this whole information disorder, or really, you know, meeting their needs, what they have at that point, at that time, on that place. And because the question, the challenges, and we were discussing it, like, you know, how you turn these local actors into media literacy educators, right? It takes a lot of effort to actually train lecturers, right? And we do a lot of training for the librarians. We are lucky enough that the Czech Republic is the country with the most dense network of libraries in the world. So it's a great, the librarians are aware about their new roles of being the guides in this information disorder. So it's a great thing, but again, equip them with all the skills. It takes time, it takes a lot of effort, and but it's doable. But my main point, again, addressing the question of these local actors. Like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the major question was like, oh, how do we verify the information? How can we find out what is true, what is not? But it's changing, and it's really intensifying in a different aspect. The aspect is that how do we respond when our close ones are sharing conspiracy theories, are falling into the depths of conspiracy theories? Because, and I don't have a data to support it, right? So this is just my kind of feeling and sense that I have, that especially the elderly populations with their life experience, they do understand how our attention is being misused and abused, right? They know the tabloid newspaper. They know how the gossip from the celebrity world works. They don't trust it 100%. They enjoy it, but they know that the titles, you know, that it's misleading, to say the least. So they can apply the same tactic, and they do it to this kind of shocking gossip about Putin. Well, not necessarily gossip, I guess, but gossip about, you know, different actors and what is happening and the migrants, right? So if you apply this, you might make them resilient in the same way that they are naturally resilient to tabloid newspaper. Let's put it that way. But the biggest challenge, what they're asking and bringing to the table, including the local actors, is just, okay, we know how to do fact-checking, basic, right? To how to do reverse image search, okay? We know how to be careful. But what do we do when our family members or community members are being radicalized and are getting deeper and deeper in the conspiracy theory? So we're getting on a level more on psychological and social psychological level. How do we respond to that? And we're really investing a lot of time into this aspect these days, discussing it, like what are the best responses when, you know, so that we don't break down as a society completely, right? So that's a challenge, but I think there are different directions that can be taken.
Okay, I will proceed then. Answering to Maya's question regarding the social workers, I would kind of expand that to civil servants. Because when we speak about children, we know that all children should have one trustworthy adult who they can turn to. Why do we think that just the social worker is the one who should support the elderly? Not all seniors are in contact with social workers, but they are in contact with librarians, which I think are seriously undervalued people, because I think they still have kind of the connotation of lending out the books rather than being the information specialists who can help. I think there is a long way to go there. But yeah, librarians are one group who can support. But also, let's take the physician. They go to their doctor. The doctor should also be able to support the senior or any other vulnerable group in dealing with their health information. Also, the doctor can be the point of consultant to tell what can and cannot be done with your health information, how it's done digitally, or be the guide through health systems, especially the Estonian case where health services, all your digital data is online and you have to cope with that, and it's quite complicated. So who is the consultant there? So I would kind of expand the digital, also media and information literacy skills to several other civil servants who people could turn to, not just seniors, but several other groups as well, but it should be more than social workers.
Milena, would you like to?
So our experience in Bulgaria is that such actions are really dispersed. We have passionate NGOs and coalitions who do very useful work, but we were also discussing recently that we have to map the various institutions and more generically the stakeholders and what are their roles and what needs to be changed in some way. The difficult question is how such change really can take place, because it seems like a very entangled domain, who does what and how they communicate with others and to what extent they can be pushed to step into the proper shoes and do a work which is needed. So I don't know if we are a sort of an outlier in this sense, but maybe again this whole EDMO network could share some experiences in the future how to improve the situation and the responses in countries which still don't have very systemic approach to these specific different groups which need to be addressed.
Thank you very much. Vitor?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to say that usually we refer to the elderly as a block, as they are all equal. For instance, in Portugal, 20% of the elderly people don't use the internet, according to recent statistics. So I fully agree with you. Civil servants, social workers, they are key. It's important to train them and to improve their capacities in terms of media literacy. But it is important to have always in mind that we have at least a group, and an important group in the case of Portugal, that maybe even if they have access, they don't use. But they have specific needs, and it's important to have this in mind too.
Thank you very much. We have another question from Miko.
Thank you very much. I tend to agree with most of the things what is said, but I would like to provoke on the media side, and that's what we try to focus as well, is the social media impact. If you think about the big picture of the media landscape and the information landscape, that is what has changed. That is what has made what we are talking about, the social media war type of things. It might be exaggerated to some extent, but that's the new part. So what we are all going is to kind of slow down, think about it, consider, go for the good sources, all that, very difficult. But I mean, what's the media logic and the business model of the social media? Go faster, go quickly, don't think about it, just go emotional. I mean, so my question is that what's the role of the social media platforms in MIL and your attitudes towards the social media in that level? Because it's like they actually know what is happening. They measure it all the time. They test it all the time. Fact checkers, we talk about the impact, nobody knows. They know, they don't give the data to the fact checkers. Oh, in the worst case, it really doesn't matter. But I mean, the social media has practically, the fact checkers in many countries where there is no under the funding model has become the kind of content moderation for the social media on the accuracy, so to say, on the stuff and all that type of things. But I think that the core has to be addressed there on that one, because those are the ones that scale. There was yesterday a session that the Google was saying that, you know, we are actually the big funder. We put like 6 million, we have trained 6 million Europeans on fact checking. What our NGO can do, I mean, we can just like, well, a couple of people here and there and talk about for the curricula change and clever things are said here. But it's completely like the speed is so different and all that. So I think that should be in the core, and that's where the media literacy world should, so to say, or however you want, we're going to call it, so to adapt and understand the role, because that's the one. But okay, that's my personal opinion, and that's what we try to put the let's say the pressure on to scale that one. But if you have anything, your insights on that one, or do you agree or disagree on this one? Thanks.
Thank you very much for that question. I will address this question in 2 points, right? So first one, yes, I fully agree. The responsibility of these big companies is clear, but there are some, you know, we're talking that, you know, in some countries 70%, 80%, 90% of senior populations are not online, so they are not necessarily the victims of algorithms. But the two key points here, right? The demographics is clear. That's the future, right? I mean, the demographics is clear. More and more people of senior age are getting online through the programs of libraries, you know, teaching them how to use internet, right? So that's one thing. And more people who use internet in their lives, in their work, are getting into the senior age. So it's just a question of time when this number will be going up, and people will be in this information ecosystem anyway. So we should already be discussing the responsibilities anyway. The age is not the key problem there. Second point, even if on our workshops there are people, like 50% of them are from a small village, they don't use internet, they're completely happy without that. It doesn't mean that their lives and decision making is not influenced by internet, social media and algorithms for many reasons, right? Politicians are on social media making decisions based on what's going on social media, on Twitter, who criticizes them, who doesn't. Journalists are on the social media. Lazy journalists are on social media using content from Facebook to generate so-called news, which is not news, right? So even though, you know, you are in a small village in the mountains, your life is being directly influenced by what's going on, how the decision-making process is being done. So again, that makes it still relevant. In many cases, many of our participants, you know, they are completely happy without the internet, but it's their son or son-in-law who brings them these shocking news that they found out about this conspiracy or that one, freaking them out, right? So again, it's the family members. And again, like labeling seniors being the most fake news spreaders is just simply unfair, because in many cases it's the younger generations who directly influence it, because they are trusted sources. Because for the seniors, like, oh, he understands the internet, he uses the internet every day, so he has to understand it, so what he's telling me must be true, clear. So these are the main points that I wanted to make regarding this, and then there was another one that I forgot. But But yeah, that's the point. So, and oh yeah, I knew. It's still, even though these active seniors who are coming to these events, they're interested in what's going on. They're interested in what's the big thing about Facebook and what it is. So still, if we are showing them what are the mechanisms, how it works, it's exciting stuff for them in many ways, right? They feel more confident because then they can talk to their grandchildren and brag about stuff. Oh, I learned about how the Facebook algorithm works, right? Or something like that. So it's still empowering in many ways that even if they're not users, if they're not necessarily the direct victims of the algorithms, just to know how it works, what's the whole buzz and fuzz about these things, about fake news, what it is, right? So it still can be empowering, enriching, and again, the important thing is not necessarily to change their behavior in many ways, but just to use this topic as an opportunity to give them some social experience, meeting with people, spending some nice time together with interesting speakers. And as a byproduct, making them more resilient to disinformation.
Probably we could draw a parallel with the consumerism. So in the interest of companies is to produce and sell more, even if the customers don't really need plenty of those items they get. And here we have some sort of a content consumerism, if I can draw such a parallel, because the business model behind this social media is that people should spend more time there, even if it's really overwhelming. If we take this average estimate that in our short-term memory we keep 7 ± 2 items, everyone here probably was bombarded with 10 times more in this morning. But if you sit there, you can see adverts, whether you look at them or not. I mean, discounts, somebody pays for it. So the business model is not in favor of getting more literate users. The business model is in favor of offering something which is sticky and people would spend more time. Yes, unfortunately, that's the reality. Whatever somebody says, they invest to train billions of people or millions of people to fact check.
Yeah, perhaps answering to Miko's question regarding what can we do, just on top of my head, one solution could be bottom up, empowering people through the knowledge of what this information does to you. Because what seems to be working for people is, what's in it for me? I've done some research with teenagers on how or why they should consume news, and just kind of looking for what would motivate them consuming news. And the first thing is, what do I get out of this? Is this the knowledge I need to know? So kind of like putting in their own benefit, explaining to people, and this is regardless of age group or any other group, putting in that, do you know that everything that you do on those platforms is turned into data, which is why those platforms do this? Of course, the user can say, so what? I don't give about that. But if you put it in a way that this data is also used against you, to manipulate you, to make you think in certain ways, is this what you want? Do you want to be the cow who is being constantly milked? If you put it in that sort of narratives, you empower people also about what and how is done with your data. Also putting it into that, for example, teenagers, what could work very well as a message is that you're constantly worrying about mental health issues and anxiety issues. Do you know that psychologists have proven that being in the environment of those overwhelming emotions that those social media platforms constantly put you in actually causes anxiety? Is that what you want? This is in it for you. So making people, making users decide for themselves is a bottom-up. We can empower people as users to be more knowledgeable of that. And then we can bring in also that you're being manipulated constantly. Is that what you want? Making choices depending on what people can do for themselves, what's in it for themselves, is actually a very massive weapon towards the interests of platforms. If we're talking about policy and regulation on governmental side, This has much less effect, in my opinion. I can rant about that as well, but that will be another question, so thank you.
Vitor?
Yes, briefly, I have nothing against the fundings and the activities and the trainings that the social media companies do, wherever in Europe or elsewhere. But media literacy, these trainings, even this bottom-up strategy, it should be a responsibility, a public responsibility of the countries, of the governments, of the ministries of education. So the states or the governments can't say, oh, okay, we don't need to do it because the private companies are doing. No, even if the private companies are doing, and if it's a good or a bad job, we will see. This continues to be a responsibility of all governments and all states. They should create conditions to offer everyone the opportunity to learn more, and independently of their age.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from our audience? Online we have no questions. Here in library. Okay, Maya. Thank you.
Okay, I was just listening to all of you, so I maybe wanted to expand a little bit on what do you personally think is the most urgent policy change or intervention? So we can all agree, I guess, that there needs to be changes on different levels, organizational as in the platforms, regulatory as in the governments, and individual as in empowering people to recognize their own agency in what they are doing. But if you think about what is the most urgent spot now. Okay, Mario.
I just have to get this one. The first thing is to get the money back from the platforms to local journalism, not just local in regional sense, but on the national level, journalism as an institution, because the erosion through that, which we've kind of enabled, platforms have taken money away from journalism as an institution in every country. And hopefully and positively, this is moving towards that, getting back money to journalism, because following what you said about trust, this is also very important, that democracy, we've kind of like failed in democracy because the trust towards institutions, and there, the informational space institution there is journalism. So giving money back to journalism and also regulating platforms that it wouldn't disempower and discredit journalism. So that would be my first thing. The policy needs to go in that.
We need responsibility for spreading fake content. So this could be institutional, because we have such cases of publications on matters which spread something which is not true. And I know people who were trying to bring this to the attention of the legal bodies and the regulator, and then they get a letter saying that's okay, that's nothing which is worrying to the extent we have to do anything about it. There are cases then when we have photographs of real people around COVID, there were cases of real nurses who appear. So a photo from 5 years ago is taken, and the nurses giving some heartbreaking story about what's happening to COVID patients, which she never did. No way to take action. I think people also need to feel that they're protected if their personal data images are misused, or if an institution is spreading something which is not really checked and true.
Mm-hmm. So also from the perspective of audience that I'm covering or discussing on two levels, the media, I completely agree. I mean, without good quality independent journalism, there's not that much to show people that, you know, you need to show them the sources that they could trust, right? That deserve their trust, and the sources they don't. Not that you would be providing them a list of these sources, trust these, don't trust these, which is what the people usually want from me first. Like, yeah, a lot of talking, but give me the list. So can I trust this one or not, right? So I'm trying to explain, no, we want you to make your decision on your own based on some of the criteria that we showed you, and you can make the assessment if that source is reliable more or less. Anyway, but if you don't have the quality media as a source, everything is pointless in this sense. From the perspective of media and newsrooms and media companies, it's essential for them to understand that the journalism job is not just 100% journalism work, but at least 5% is talking about the journalism work and showing people the inside, the backstage of it, right? And enabling them to spend the time, some quality time with the citizens and with the people, right? Not that the journalists, usually they need to take a day off. If we want them to come, you know, to some event, they need to take a day off. It's usually a problem with their managers. This is a unnecessary barrier. And if the trust in media will decrease as it is, I mean, they will lose their brands. Their media companies will break down anyway, right? So this understanding that at least 5% of journalists' work should be talking about journalism is essential to make it a mainstream. And from the governmental perspective, I mean, it's really about like doing really solid assessment of all the potential allies on the local level that are out there struggling these days, trying to help their communities not to be radicalized, not to be falling for disinformation, trying to be the guides, be the librarians, workers, community workers, whatever that is, and just really providing quality services to them, equipping them with the skills, equipping them with all that is needed to be able to do that, which is a little piece in this bigger concept of the necessity of strategic communications of the states and everything, but that's a whole another story. But I would suggest this on the policy level. And then, like, as I said, I mean, if you're not able to provide a quality services and social opportunities for the neglected groups on the local level, no matter how much you will be scaring them about fake news and disinformation, I mean, those people, you know, will be losing trust, and we will be losing those people.
Vitor?
Important things have already been said, but I think that the independent journalism might be directly funded by not the government, but by public entities, by independent public entities. I don't know. It's important to find a way to directly fund the journalists because it's a public service. Because the thing is, and as you said, it's not a question of truth. We don't need a Ministry of Truth. We need sufficient funds to help professional and independent journalism. Because this service is a public service, it's a key public service. This is a question of trust and not a question of truth, I think.
Thank you very much. Any more questions? Okay, Mika.
Commentary
just the commentary, okay.
Help you. No, thanks. It's a really good point. I would just I want to underline something that at least we define fact-checking as part of an investigative journalism. So getting fact-checking back to journalism that is really in the trouble because the social media break the business model. And yes, the old media was also very lazy. And we have to say that one. And now it's just waking up, not just journalists, but the media houses. And then I think that was also a very good idea where I think fact-checkers have been showing the example. They are much more transparent on their work than the journalist. And I've been just saying in the Finnish media, for example, that why don't you show how a difficult work you are doing? And they're just like, we don't want to say it so, but it's more like how and why not to go for the label? So this kind of 5% of just like explaining your work. And there are some initiatives who try to do that with the journalist. But the pedagogical side doesn't come naturally for journalists. That's what I've learned. It's a different skill set, so to say. And then this funding thing, because of course that's essential. But Vitor, you have in Portugal the foundation that could serve as a kind of a clearinghouse for the funding, the Gulbenkian one. But practically what has happened It's one individual platform giving a bit of initiative money, and now it doesn't really be the appealing, and this is of course nitty-gritty money for the sector, but there is a kind of clearinghouse that actually Divina and I and many others were pushing 2018, because fundamentally outside that we are just left for the social medias to do a little favor there. You are working for us. All the media houses are normally, almost all of them outside public sector media probably are getting some sort of little help or subvention, and then we are not talking about the real things. That's the problem. But this is just like independent observations, but on a very, very troubled, let's say, media ecosystem. So, but thanks a lot. I think just binding those together.
Does anyone want to react to Mika's commentary? If not, do we have any questions? Okay, thank you. In the back.
Well, I'd like to ask a question. First of all, I'm glad that journalism has been mentioned now, and I really like the session today. It's so completely different to what happened yesterday. So I agree completely that actually fact-checking is an oxymoron. It shouldn't be, but yeah. So we talk a lot about checking facts, checking information, let's say. We talk a lot about workshops, about educating people through some conventional meanings of approaching, through changing curricula, through workshops in various institutions, through social workers. But what about people who, I assume, okay, it might be a wrong assumption. I haven't been so much related to all this stuff as you guys, but my assumption is that the people who need our assistance the most won't be the one who seek it. So they won't go for workshops. They're not interested, and very often they're so firmly rooted in their own bias that they feel all our attempts as attacks. So what do you think about that? How can we reach to those people, whether they're online or not, regardless of which generation they are? So how to come to them, how to make them listen?
I can start from my research. 2 years ago, we did the Estonian Science Barometer, which should show the people's perception about science, what they believe, why they believe, how they trust science, etc. What came out, and that was just in the very beginning of COVID crisis, was that we knew that 5% will be very susceptible to anti-vaccination, all that. 5%, that's not too much. So those are the people who you cannot convince. Estonia is has very high trust in science. It was almost 80% who say that they put their trust in science, they trust scientists and all that. So potentially no anti-vaxxers there either. But there was also this middle, which had not made their minds on the topic, on science, on vaccination, on others. Since Science Barometer is done also in other countries, in Finland, in Germany, in Sweden, elsewhere, so we also had kind of the comparison, and we knew where it was gonna go. We knew that if you are not convincing those people who are in the gray area, who have not made up their minds, and this is not just about COVID or vaccination or health issues, this also applies to disinformation and all that. So the patterns are the same. Who reaches this gray area first? Is it the 5%? Or is it the other? And in those countries, and in several Eastern European countries, the grey area is much wider than it was in Estonia. In the case of COVID, unfortunately, this 5% expanded because we thought that we are like trusting the science overall. The society is very like puts their faith in science, but it can expand this 5% of those, as you said, who don't want to be trained. This can expand. This 5% is kind of in every society. if it's more than 15, it's a huge problem, because then there is 15% of society who will expand their objection to, for example, media literacy issues as well. I think, yeah, there's also a comment.
I think it's very important that we don't make them listen to what we are saying, but we train ourselves to listen to people. And that is a very important thing. As Mario, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong, but as Mario said, we need to train ourselves to talk to people. That's a very important skill that we are losing. It's having conversations about difficult topics, maybe polarizing topics that we don't agree on. If we need to train ourselves to talk to people with different opinions, and it's very hard. As in my family, there are quite some people who are on the opposite side on vaccination or not, and it's a very hard discussion, and I really don't know how to do it properly. It's something that we have lost, and it's about listening. It's about listening to concerns that people have, and it's something very important, I guess, in this whole thing. It's not us spreading some truthiness to other people, but it's also having conversations, I guess. So, very important thing to add.
If I may respond, yeah, I completely agree with you, because I mean, it's about really finding where's the line where you want to confront your close one and relatives about that specific thing, right? So, like, spreading disinformation emails, I mean, it's only one part of your identity, right? And it's a problem when we try to emphasize that identity, that this person, oh, he's a conspiracy spreader or something, because we each have different types of identity, so maybe we should focus more on those and not have the feeling of, oh, I need to debunk everything, or I need to correct him. You wouldn't believe in how many cases we were getting requests, something like, oh, my grandmother was always nice, kind person, and now she completely went crazy, she's hateful because she's receiving these emails, can you come and fix her? I'm exaggerating, but that was the type of request, right? It's just like, nah, no, this is not how it works. And so it's about like being able to identify like where's the line where you still wanna bring factual information to that person, or when it is more important to remain to keep good relationships with your family or within your group, hoping that maybe over time things will improve, but not just losing that person completely. So this is to respond to your question. To respond to your question, I completely agree with what my colleague said. Let's be realistic in what expectations and goals we set for our activities, right? So yes, if we have those 5%, I mean, our objective is not to drag them from those 5% into more mainstream. And I don't even think it's legitimate from us and fair to do that as an organization that gets funding from international donors and stuff like that, right? So, but we're thinking about that, those people who are somewhere in the middle, and just helping them from, preventing them from falling into those 5%, right? Just like keeping them somewhere where they we don't lose them completely. And there is one misconception that I hear a lot about events like this, that we're targeting only those who don't need it, or that we are targeting only people who actively come to the local library. That's true, but they're active people, they're active seekers, and they're active seekers of truth as well. So very often, the participants who come to those events are the ones who are trying to find the truth, right? And they are using YouTube, different channels to find it. They are feeling, they're falling into the conspiracy world, and they want to learn it. And maybe paradoxically, but very often, the fact-checking verification workshop is the best way how to engage with them, because they want to learn the skills, right? They do fact-checking themselves. They feel like they're doing fact-checking. They're checking all the different sources to find the truth. So keeping them engaged, giving them the opportunity to stay within the group and learn new skills is a very effective way. So these active people are part of the audience there. And and my experience is that, I don't think we ever got them out of the conspiracy world, right? I don't think so. We managed to do that. They're just like hardly embedded there. But we did find some kind of a respect. And attitudes and opinions, when they bring it up in that group, it's the best learning moment for everyone. Just like understanding what are our positions, why we trust this, why don't we trust this. So it's a great opportunity. And again, our aim was not, and I could tell so many stories, but just like after leaving our workshop that those people would stop believing conspiracy. It's not happening. We just made a connection. We didn't exclude them completely. We gave them some new skills that, you know, they're excited to explore, find maybe new conspiracies, which is fine, but they're happy, you know, in many ways, because the world started making sense to them. There's someone who directs this mass, right? There is someone, and I'm a hero in this whole story, because they are trying to manipulate me as an ordinary citizen. I am being manipulated. So they feel empowered very much. They're excited, and that's fine. I mean, let's have them play. I mean, in a way, right? Like, let's not try to exclude them.
Just to add a couple of thoughts, in the media and information literacy field, our battle is basically to help people improve their skills, improve their understanding, not to give directly answers. And I think one of the issues is of the critical mass. Continuing what Mario said, we basically want to see that there are more people who would question, who would have the critical thinking really as part of their, I was going to say lifestyle, but maybe as something they really apply in their everyday life, not just when they have to analyze a piece of more sophisticated information, but really on a very mundane level. That's where we arrived. We need to check everything. So I think this is where we try to intervene, to have more people who would have these skills. This probably will somehow start shifting a little bit the balance, because people look what is happening around. If they have the ability to look, reflect, and change something in their thinking, they probably will develop. If they don't, then I don't think that anyone could help, really.
Thank you, Vitor.
Yes, just to conclude, yes, I agree with Jared and with you all. But let's be realistic. Even in Portugal, for instance, the vaccination rate against COVID was the highest in the world at some time. I don't remember when, but we had more than 90% when some countries had 20s and 30s and 40s. But we still have the same problem, and maybe it's not 5%, it's 6% or 3%. And let's be realistic, yes. But to try to change, one of the ways, it's not a new one, but it's a way that we try to implement. We have to reach people where they are. If we need to involve YouTubers, let's involve YouTubers. If we need to involve people from local communities or very small local communities, let's involve some people from the local community that have some knowledge that is more open. But this is not the solution. This is only a proposal.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Our time is up. I'm very sorry that I have to stop this discussion. Thank you very much to our panelists for your time, for your insights, for your thoughts. They were really inspiring, and I think the discussion was nice. And and I would like to also thank those who are sitting here in the library, and also those who are watching us online for your, I hope you had great time. And at the end of this section, I would like to tell you that this whole conference places great emphasis on the principles of sustainability and circular economy, and in that we are fully aligned with the newly created sustainability strategy of the capital city of Prague and the Charles University. Our event minimize waste production and any negative impact on the environment. One of the tangible steps is that we will ask you to give us back your badge strips. usually have plenty of them at home. And also we work closely with local suppliers that also value principles of environmental, social and economic sustainability. Before we say goodbye, I would also like to once again thank the City of Prague for its generous support, the funding from the National Recovery Plan and the European Commission via its different lines of support, the Charles University, who is the lead coordinating institution in CEDMO. I would like to also thank the support of Microsoft, the partner of the conference, and the Charles University in bolstering cybersecurity, education, and democracy, and also the Municipal Library in which this section has taken place. Thank you very much all. Thank you panelists, thank you speakers, and have a nice day. See you soon.
Thank you too for the questions and the moderation.